Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of February of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the relations between the President of Ukraine Zelensky and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. It's time for him to go. Trump got so angry at Zelensky during US-Russia talks that he almost cuts off military aid to Ukraine. That was stated by Axios. You know that today during the day we got a lot of very interesting updates that according to them the US has already stopped sending weapons to Ukraine. Now let's continue. The White House believes that the Ukrainian president has become too accustomed to unconditional support from Biden, NATO, and favorable media coverage, which is why he overdid it in the negotiations. One official said that the US created a monster out of Zelensky and that European allies obsessed with Trump but unwilling to send troops are giving him bad advice. Another White House official involved in the talks compared Zelensky to an actor who made the typical mistake of theater kids by starting to associate himself with the character he plays. You know that it is very interesting and funny to see how Zelensky first was just the president of Ukraine, he was the shield of democracy and so on. Then Zelensky became illegitimate president, then he became unsuccessful president, then Zelensky became a dictator, then Zelensky became an actor who made a typical mistake of theater kids. Then he became comic, and now he's a monster, according to the Western media, according to Donald Trump. You know, if we continue, most likely sooner or later, Zelensky will become a terrorist, or even more, or even something worse. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. Another important statement made by New York Post, citing Trump sources. Zelensky should immediately leave Ukraine for France. So this is another proof that most likely in December, Biden's special services transferred Zelensky to France to Macron. And now Macron is the only guarantor for Zelensky for his security. But today, Macron made lots of very important statements. We are not planning to send troops to Ukraine, the first statement. Troops could be sent as a part of peacekeeping security guarantees for Ukraine. Also, Macron stated that he wants to finish this war. But the most important that probably Macron is the only president who considers Zelensky as a legitimate president. Anyway, this situation can be finished very soon. And most likely Macron just plays his own game. Macron had a lot of problems in Africa during the previous several months when having conflict with the Russian Federation. And most likely Macron just wants to get as much as possible or maybe to return some positions in this continent. And as soon as he gets everything he wants, most likely Zelensky will be forced to find for another patron who can provide him guarantees and security. Now let's back to Ukraine and let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. As you can see, we have a lot of changes on the ground. Some of them were confirmed by different mappers, some of them were confirmed by real geolocations. Today, according to the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Novosilka. Telling the truth, that was really fast. The Russians made just one attack and Ukraine defense collapsed. Now the Russians are regrouping and most likely in the very near future they will continue offensive further in the direction of Vilna Polya. The distance between the edge Russian positions and the village itself is less than 4 kilometers. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians took another block of the company stronghold that located to the northwest of Velika Novoselovka. So another block, another tree line was captured by the Russians. Currently, the Russians control up to 60% of this stronghold, and most likely the Ukrainians in the very near future will be forced to fall back. Another important update is coming from the settlement of Nova Cheritovatsa. Today, the Russian sources published this video, and in this video we can see at least several Russian soldiers that were moving across the village and that were waving with the Russian flags and the signs of units that were taking the settlement under complete control. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Furthermore, today the information that the settlement was secured by the Russians was also confirmed by the group of forces faces east. Furthermore, during this report, we got confirmation of Russian control over Novoselka and over Novochertovate. And now we see that the Russians are trying to advance from two flanks with the purpose to take these territories under complete control. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the vicinity of Andreevka fortified area or in the Bogatyr direction. As you can see, we have adjusted the map. Today the Russian sources published another video, and in this video we can see several Russian soldiers that were moving through the settlement of Ulakly and how the Russians were establishing and waving with the Russian flag. Based on this video we have adjusted the map and we have colored the territory of Ulakly completely under Russian control. There were two flags in the video. The first one was raised in this part of the settlement, the second one was raised in the central part. So as you can see, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this territory. Anyway, we believe that there are still pockets of resistance in this pocket from Ukrainian side, but most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to retreat and will not be able to break through the defenses with the purpose to connect with their forces in Constantinople. We don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians are planning to hold their positions in this village. Most likely tomorrow or the day after, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the direction of Bogatyr. So I believe we can start counting days when the entire pocket collapses and become under complete Russian control. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dnipro direction. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. First of all, let's discuss the settlement of Nadezhdinka. Today, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that this settlement was also captured by the Russians. Based on this report, we have adjusted the map. This territory used to be considered as a territory under complete Ukrainian control or the area in the gray zone, but now we have no doubts that the settlement was secured. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take under control tree lines and the farms between the settlement of Zaporozhye and the settlement of Nadezhdinka. The Russians are trying to shorten the distance to the Dnipro region, and currently the distance between the edge Russian positions and the Dnipro region is less than 7.5 kilometers. The Russians are getting closer and closer, and we see that the Ukrainians can't do anything with this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got a lot of very interesting updates, and the most important are coming from the settlement of Lysovka. I'll remind you that just yesterday, the pro-Ukrainian sources published this map. We are talking about Deep State, and according to them, the Ukrainians, as a result of successful counter-offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the village of Lysovka and to force the Russians to fall back. So this information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian sources without any proofs. But today, in the middle of the 21st of February, the Russian sources published the video, or more precisely, the Ukrainian sources published the video, how they were attacking, how they were bombing the edge positions of the armored forces of Russian Federation in the northern Lysovka. So as you can see, during 2 days, we got two completely opposite reports from pro-Ukrainian sources. Yesterday, the Ukrainians were saying that they managed to secure this territory completely, and now we have completely opposite report that the Russians were controlling the northern part. As for now, it's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening here, but we believe that both reports are correct. The Ukrainians most likely managed to counterattack and to restore control over the settlement, but later the Russians carry out very successful another counter-offensive operation, and as a result of this counter-attack, the Russians managed to take under control this part of Lysovka, and the main purpose of the Russians was to cut the southern and the central part from the mainland. Most likely the Russians managed to complete this task. As for the Toretsk and the city of Chasiv, during the first 24 hours we haven't received anything special. Just the regular activities. The Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, trying to clear the trenches, fortifications, with the purpose probably to prepare the foothold before further offensive operation. The same situation took place in the Siversk and the southern Kupiansk direction, just regular artillery duels without any changes on the ground. Most likely the Russians are regrouping before possible offensive operation in this area that is going to take place in the very near future. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sudzha direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the triangle between the settlements of Darina, Zhuravka and Basovka. As you can see, we have lots of changes on the ground. First, let's compare the map. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 20th of February. The Russians just managed to take under control the border between Ukraine and Russia, and today several independent resources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions further and to answer the settlement of Basovka. This offensive operation is very dangerous, and this information was provided us by pro-Russian resources. As for the end of the 21st of February, we still haven't received even a single report that can confirm this. When talking about neutral mappers, they confirm this information, but not for 100%. Neutral mappers reported that indeed the Russians managed to carry out several successful attacks, but they suppose that this territory is more covered as a fog of war or as a gray zone, but not the territory under complete Russian control. So as we can see, most of the mappers are trying to be are not trying to risk with the situation until we get additional or better clarifications. Anyway, if the Russians indeed manage to answer the settlement of Basovka, then this is the beginning of complete disaster for the armored forces of Ukraine. The distance between the possible Russian edge positions in the settlement of Basovka and the main supply arteria N07 road it varies from 4 till 5.5 kilometers, which is already a distance of tank attack or complete control with FPV drone. Most likely, the nightmare for the Ukrainians in the Sudzha direction has started. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. Now let's discuss the situation in the northern Ukrainian direction. You know that during the previous several days we've been talking a lot about possible Bryansk offensive operation that, according to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians are planning to start in the very near future. But telling the truth, when talking about real data, when talking about geolocations and videos that we received in this area, I must say that the situation here is completely opposite to the reports that we see from the Russian sources. And according to geolocations, I believe that the Russians is the side who is planning to begin offensive operation in this area. For example, today we got very important video from the settlement of Yanzhugulivka. In this video, we can see how the Russians destroyed another bridge along the river by the name of Strativa. So as a result of probably explosion, the bridge was destroyed, and this bridge was destroyed by the Russian side. When talking about this area, since the beginning of November, we got a lot of updates exactly from this territory, and most of them were how the Russians were destroying the bridges along the same river. And telling the truth, we believe that the Russians have already established complete control over the settlement of Krasny Lozy, Karpovichi, Khаты, Kalinovskaya, Timofevichi, Medvedivka. So all these territories are already under complete Russian control. And the thing is that we see that the Russian side don't want to point people's attention to this area. The Russians are trying to cover this area and not to provide anything from here. And just standalone geolocations tell us that something big is happening in this direction. And you know that this is not the only area where we got a lot of interesting updates. If we zoom out, we're gonna see that there are 4 areas of very huge activities of the Russian forces. This is, for example, the first area we've discussed. This is the second one. This is the third one. This is the fourth one. And this is the fifth one. And telling the truth, we believe that the settlement of Shostka is the heart of Ukrainian defense in the northern Ukrainian direction. Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation in the area that we've just discussed. The distance to this area is 74 kilometers. The Ukrainians try to stabilize the situation in the vicinity of Belaya Berezka. The Ukrainians try to stabilize the situation in the vicinity of Seredina Buda, and the Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation along M3 road. And we see that the Russians are doing everything they can with the purpose to secure every single territory and maybe even to create a buffer zone. And when talking about this part we just discussed, the Russians have already done this. Furthermore, when talking about this part, the Russians, since the beginning of November, published at least several videos how they managed to enter this territory with the sabotage and reconnaissance group. And for example, in this video, we can see even the Russian flag that was raised probably above the local library. And based on this video, in November, we adjusted the map in Russian favor. Furthermore, we got another video with the Russian soldiers that were moving in this area and waving a Russian flag. We have the video how the Russians destroyed the bridges. So when talking about this part, the main strategy of the Russians to destroy bridges and then to take territories that were cut from Ukrainian mainland. So this is the tactics. And for example, when talking about the settlement of Seredina Buda in February of 2025, we got report from pro-Russian resources that according to Ukrainian sources, a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group entered the settlement of Seredina Buda in the Sumy region. Also, we have lots of geolocations from this territory. Furthermore, we have very huge activities of how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian positions with artillery along M3 road. All these things and all these updates tell us that most likely the Russians is the side who is planning to attack the Ukrainians in this area, because telling the truth, the M02 or M3 road is the shortest distance between the border with Russian Federation and the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Maybe the Russians are planning to repeat offensive operation that took place at the beginning of the special military operation, and who knows, maybe the Russians are planning to begin this offensive operation on the anniversary of the beginning of the special military operation that is going to take place during the next several days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.